Are you confused about your niche as a financial advisor? Everyone says you're supposed to have one or you're missing out if you don't, but you have no idea where to start. By the end of this video, you will have clarity on how to market and grow your business through a fresh approach to defining your niche. Time to think like an investor. For most of my career, with all of the advice I got and all the business books I read, I would glaze over everything that had to do with niche. I just kind of hated seeing the word. Why would you want to close yourself off from 99% of the world's business? That sounds like an idiot idea. But over the past few years, I've actually really started to understand the power of this concept, kind of by luck or happenstance. I mean, think about it. In a world where there's millions and millions of competitors, how are you supposed to stand out? Let's say you're a 31-year-old dentist who is paying off their student debt and want to build their own practice. What financial services business immediately draws your attention? American financial advisor firm. Or investment counsel firms focused on 30 to 35-year-old dentists looking to start their own practice and pay off student debt. If you read those two headlines, it's a no-brainer. One of them is specialized for the solution you're looking for, and one of them is not. Now, obviously, there's a downside. If you market yourself as the person looking for 30 to 35-year-old dentists, well, you're probably not going to get too many clients outside of 30 to 35-year-old dentists. But here's the thing. In a world where we can get our message out to millions of people and we can do meetings across the globe from the comfort of our own living room, it actually makes a ton of sense to specialize. If you can cast a wide enough net and solve for such a specific problem, you might be able to find enough opportunities to grow and scale faster than someone who just generalizes and competes with everybody. It makes a lot of sense in a business where you really only need a couple hundred clients to thrive. So I said, all right, time to hunker down and get myself a niche. But I immediately ran into a problem. Wait a second, look at all of these great clients I have that I love to deal with that don't fit into a niche I would ever want to operate in. Do I just never get to see these people again? Am I really cutting myself off from all these potential amazing opportunities just to focus on specializing in one niche? Like, am I allowed to have multiple, or does that dilute the power of the niche I'm going after? And then you finally get through all that and then you realize, wait a second, I found a niche that I like, but there's no way to target them. There's no pattern among these different people that I like dealing with. Earlier in my career, one of my really big breakthrough clients was this older gentleman. I'll call him Bob for now. And Bob loved to call me at all hours of the day and ask for my opinion on certain stocks and if he should buy them or sell them. Throughout the week, he might call me up randomly out of the blue while I'm busy and ask me about my opinion on geopolitics. Every single time I tried to engage Bob in some really productive conversation, talking about vision and values and maybe doing some financial planning about his goal, Bob saw that as tertiary. It wasn't even secondary. It was something that was just of no value. He wanted to talk shop about macroeconomics. He would kind of nitpick the indices that we were benchmarking against, or he would cherry pick random companies that had a particularly unfair disadvantage over the time period. And he would really just micromanage every piece. And don't even get me started on the fees. Every time he saw the statement of fees, he would make me call him and prove him why they were worth it. And he made me justify it to him. I got to the point where I would see his name pop up on my phone in the middle of the day and I wasn't even busy. I'd look at it and I would just click it and I'd go like this. I was just in no mood to ever talk to this guy. But you see, at the time, this early in my career, I couldn't say no because this was such a breakthrough big client for me that it allowed me to kind of hone my skills in dealing with people like that, but it also got me comfortable dealing with larger sums of money. But then later down the road, I got another breakthrough client, actually bigger than Bob. His name was Sam, and he was quite a bit younger. He was actually closer towards my age. From day one, he was incredibly helpful, and he was up for whatever we wanted. Sam actually just sent me all the documents, all the different investment statements. He sent me his will and his estate plan, insurance. He had all of his balance sheet and his income statement ready for me. He listened to my approach and my philosophy on planning, and he was engaged, and he was actually excited to get started in our process. And we created massive value across the entire picture. It was this kind of realization where Sam was like, holy, where have you guys been? This is fantastic work. Every time I get a text or call from Sam, I'm super excited to answer. Whenever I get an email, I'm just ready to dive into whatever he wants me to do because I want to provide value. He's someone who's bought in on me and my process. And the last thing, in comparison to Bob, Sam never once questioned the fees. He would actually say, oh my goodness, this is great value. This is actually significantly less than I was paying before. And you guys are doing so much more. If you're in the business, I imagine you have your own Bobs and your own Sams or something slightly resembling that. And so today I want to tell you guys about the epiphany or the profound insight I had about what separates the Sams from the Bobs and how we can ultimately acquire more perfect fit Sams for our business. Listen in for a second. Let's talk about the market for oil changes, okay? We have ourselves a graph here. On one axis, willing, and on another axis, able. There's two dynamics to taking action. Are you willing and are you able? Are you both? Are you one or the other? Let's start with the bottom corner of this graph, okay? We have people who are not very able, but they are very willing. They have no idea how to change the oil, but boy, if they did, they would be in there. Or even worse, these could be like the Dunning-Kruger people who actually think they're able, but they're not, and they're also willing. So that can get you in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of damage that happens down here. Let's call these people, the reluctant delegators. They delegate it, they pay for it to be done, but they really wish they didn't have. Now, let's go across the line vertically. Well, if we have people who are both very willing and also very able, on this end of the extreme, those are the people who are competent enough to change their own oil and they really want to. Maybe they don't see the value in their time, or maybe their time isn't worth that much. They, for whatever reason, maybe get joy out of changing the oil, and they're also very able to do it. So we call these are DIYers. These are the do-it-yourselfers. Now, how about those who are very able and competent to change their own oil, but they're just not willing? These might actually be the kind of people who have the right attitude towards their time and money. They're both mature enough to know that they could change their own oil and be able to do that, but they're also financially mature enough to know their time is probably spent better elsewhere. For now, let's just call this group maybe the content delegators. They're the content ones. They're okay to outsource this. They're cool, but they could do it if they really had to. And lastly, in the bottom left corner, we have the ecstatic delegators. People who are not able and they're not willing, and they're willing to admit all of that. And so if they can bring their car to the mechanic and they can do the oil change, even if it costs a lot, it's a relief to them because they don't want to do it and they don't know how to do it, and it's easier to just have it done by somebody else. If we can think back to where Bob was and where Sam was on this chart, where do we think they are? Well, it looks to me like Bob is both very willing and very able to get active in this process and potentially take this on himself. Bob seems to be a DIYer who's delegated. He is somebody who is very passionate and very aggressively concerned about everything that's happening day to day and wants to play a role. Where do we think Sam was in this process? Well, the reality was it's tougher to answer that one, but Sam was somewhere in the realm over here. Sharp guy, he had great ability, he was a wealthy person, but he was willing to admit that he didn't have the competence required to manage his finances at the scale that he had. And so that is what made him such a great client, is he was willing. He was both content and relieved to delegate this. So what am I ultimately getting at in terms of niche? I am looking for clients that are towards this end of the spectrum. And if they end up being up here or around here or anywhere in here, that's great. I'm ultimately working towards this bottom lower half quadrant, preferably the furthest away from this that I can be. And the reason why that delivers the most value is it's because it's the people that are the most willing and relieved and happy to delegate these things and get them off their plate. If you can build a result for them where they create the financial future that they want and the outcomes that they want without having to do any of the hands-on nitty-gritty work, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're not engaged or they don't have any investment in the outcome or the result. It just means that they're not as willing to get their hands dirty in the day-to-day minutia of the investments and the financial planning. And for me, that's kind of what I prefer. So how does this end up being more profitable and higher long-term value? Well, for that, I want to introduce this idea of the value line. In any business, we have obviously the price of our services, and that's red because it is what it costs the client. Now in the green, we have the value that we provide. And sometimes we do something really great for a client, and other times maybe you don't talk to them for a very long time, and then you do an annual meeting or what have you. The value that the client perceives they're getting changes all the time. Now here's the point of the value line. If you get to the point where the value has declined below the price for too long, the client eventually says, no, I'm not in this anymore. I'm just not seeing the value for the price that I'm paying. And so in an ideal world as advisors, we could start up here and do nothing but go up and up and up, and we could do a fantastic job of creating this massive gap between value and price. That's the point of having a really great offer. That's the point of specializing in a niche, to deliver more value for a set of people. Now here's my point. The long-term value of our client depends on how long that they stay with us for. The longer into the future we maintain that relationship, the more profitable and the better that is for our business. We have an incentive to continue providing value for clients over and over, year after year, so that they stay with us, because the cost of acquiring that customer only happened here, and we get to reap the rewards of that forever, provided that we're trading value for the dollars they're paying us. Now here's the problem. If we all of a sudden take on somebody who is a DIYer, they're both very willing and very able to do all of their planning themselves, what I find is that those clients psychologically start down here. They start with this internal complex of, this guy's really gonna have to prove his value or else I could do it myself. You have to grind your way and painstakingly try to get above this line to prove that you're good enough to have that person's business. And then over time, investments weren't as good as the index one year, and boom. And all of a sudden, we try to get some of that goodwill back and something happens in the market, or they make a bunch of money in crypto, and now why am I hiring this guy? And over time, their equilibrium for what they perceive your value as is always in comparison to what they could be doing themselves. Now, our ecstatic and relieved delegators, on the other hand, are on the opposite end of the spectrum. They start psychologically up here, and the sky is then the limit. You see, they're just so excited to have this off of their plate where they can not have to think about it, they can have peace of mind that it's taken care of, and they can still get the result they want. That is why it's so great to work with delegators, because for the same acquisition cost of the customer, we acquire them once over here, we have so much more goodwill. We are providing so much value in between. And the reality is, we don't have to change anything about the value we're delivering. We don't have to change our offer. We're just finding the right fit client that is now producing more value. The exact opposite from those hardcore DIYers and those people who are very willing to manage things themselves, who are gonna have to constantly vie for their validation throughout the entire professional relationship. So anyways, guys, if you're somebody who, like me, wants to deal with a lot more Sams and maybe less Bobs, maybe integrate this into your process. Maybe think about your ideal clients and the fact that you might be able to provide more value for delegators. It might be a more profitable long-term niche to focus on, and maybe you might even consider asking your clients where they fall on that graph before signing them up. So if you found any value here whatsoever, make sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.